if I understand correctly, you and your brother created a board game. Is that
Yes,
right? Is it the Ultimate Baseball, the game? Is that the
yes,
one?
that's correct.
Okay.
Ultimate Baseball, the game.com, I guess. And we have a Facebook page. We couldn't keep it going. I mean, we still have a whole bunch of games that we can sell, but we couldn't keep it going. It just costs too much money.
Hmm.
Starting a new business costs too much money. And but it was it's the game was actually, it's kind of a long history here. But our dad, during the off season growing up, in order to keep baseball in the home, so to speak. My oldest two brothers, there are five of us. I'm the youngest, and there's a sister in the middle. But the oldest two brothers, my dad created a board game
Okay.
so that they could play. But the board game had a manual spinner, which you would spin and it would go around, and then there would be, 25 numbers, and Dad had a chart that said, ball, strike, out 6-3, uh, a single, whatever.
Hmm.
And you had all these options, but it was pretty much just the roll of the die and chance.
Right.
But it all centered around a certain strategy which we developed. You have four different colors of marbles, and they represent different pitches. And then you show a marble to the opponent,
Okay.
and then they try to guess the same color. If they guess the same color, there's a right guess result that shows single, double, ball, or home run.
Okay.
And uh, and then there are different results depending on how many runners are on base, and also depending on how many outs there are. And of course, if you guess it wrong, then the result is either a strike or an out or a foul or whatever. Well,
Hmm.
what happened was, about 20 years ago, 22 or 3 years ago, my the older three brothers and I, the four brothers, got together, and we had a family reunion, and we decided to get the game out to play, just in memory of our dads,
Hmm.
because my dad died when I was in college.
Okay.
So and so we started playing the game, and we thought, you know what, we need to make this more, and we made up a term, simulatorily more accurate. So
That's even better. On the box, it's unprecedented realism,
yes,
and
that's
now
right.
it's
That's right.
simulate.
So and so we made it, what we did was, instead of a spinner, we made a what we call a 30-sided die. I
Did
should
you
have gotten one.
design that?
I have one downstairs. There's a 30-sided die that you roll, you roll,
Okay.
and you have these results. And we've tried to calculate it so that the percentages are similar to a real game. And also we've included the players' career stats, so
Hmm.
that their batting average, their slugging percentage, is all included in their player rating card. So that
Okay.
if you're Babe Ruth, who's the highest ranking player in our game, if you Babe Ruth and you're batting against a weaker pitcher, you have a lot better chance of getting on base. And if you have a lot of power, which Babe Ruth had, your chances of getting a home run are much higher than, say, somebody who's a singles hitter.
Okay.
And so yeah, we've gotten, over the years, we've played with different leagues where we've got, we have a draft. And and we have all these, hundreds of players. And of course, you can't just have all good players. Some of your players are going to be really strong, and then others will be not as strong. And then you might put in players who have a higher defensive skills. And that comes into play, because if you roll the die and you roll for an error, you can overturn that error if your defensive player has a very strong defensive ability. And
Hmm.
Uh, so those people will more readily make fewer errors than those defensive players that aren't as good at defense.
Yeah.
So
Well, I get it all sounds, and it's supposed to like be, if I understand correctly, like one game of this board game is supposed to take about the same time as a game of baseball, right?
yeah, yeah. In fact, during the winter break, my brother from my next oldest brother, in he's 68 in Indianapolis. Uh, he um, he came down and we played a few games, and we have a league right now, just the two of us, and we each have three teams, and we have our A team, our B team, our C team.
Amazing.
And at first, we put all either both teams, both A teams played each other a couple of times, and now we're doing the round where the A team will play the other guy's C team, and that team should win more the most of the time,
Yeah.
just because they have stronger players and stronger pitching staff and so forth. And So we're doing that round right now. And on a given day, the weakest team will beat the best team. But if the weakest team has their one hole pitcher pitching and the best team has their number 5 hole pitcher pitching, yeah, you might have a chance to beat the top team, but it's not going to happen every time.
Hmm.
And
Well,
just like in real baseball, some people think it's chance and all that kind of thing, but of course we know that's not true. The best team normally will win the division and the World Series and so forth. So yeah,
yeah.
we put it out there some years ago, and yeah, it sold a few, but and we got some people to respond who were diehard baseball fans, and I should say diehard board fans. you
Hmm.
know, but many people asked, "Oh, is there a digital version of this game?" And of course, maybe because we're a little bit old school, or maybe because we don't have the time, um, and we couldn't simulate it digitally and accurately. There's just too many details involved, and so we haven't done that. But that was probably the reason why we couldn't continue with it.
Hmm. Well, okay. It might seem like this has nothing to do with music, but I think it really speaks towards just how you think about things. I remember, without getting too deep into ping pong, I remember Rocky and I had brought up once while we were in school that we had been playing lately and had joked about getting together to play a game with you. And I remember being awestruck at how you approached that conversation. It was like, oh, like, where did you get your paddle from? Or like, did you custom order it? And based on these questions, you were like, you'd be lucky to score this many points against us. And then you asked another question, and it was like, oh, well, in that case, you'd probably be lucky to get this many points. And you had like you thought about all this in this analytical way of just based on statistically, like this is kind of where you're at. And that was at the time overwhelming. And seeing how you've gone through this approach to creating this baseball game with that same unprecedented realism. What I'm curious about is, does this way of thinking about the world, or I mean, at least about your passions, how does that same mindset creep into the way that you think about music and the way that you approach it?
Yeah.
Does that
Gosh,
make sense?
there's so much to address here. First, let me make the connection with baseball.
Okay.
Um, and More or less, baseball is the only sport in the world. Uh, there might be some exceptions, but it's the only sport in the world where the defense has the ball.
Mm,
It's um, it's the only sport for, for, uh, for the most part where there's no clock. Yeah, the pitcher has to deliver a pitch within a certain number of seconds. Of course, that's only a recent addition to the game, um, but you don't lose because the clock ran out.
Hmm.
You're not playing against the clock like you are in basketball or football, all these lesser sports. Okay. And now in basketball, you got to play both sides, offense and defense. In football, I just think it's ridiculous that you got an offensive team, you got a defensive team. They're completely separate. Now, that's why I'm kind of old school. I don't like the designated hitter because the pitcher doesn't have to bat
Right.
in baseball. But be that as it may, those qualities make the game unique. And there's another quality, and this has a strong relationship, and that's a word that I'm going to use more here. But it has a strong relationship between baseball and music in general, and jazz in particular. And that is the fact that you have a very equal responsibility between the individual and the team.
Mm.
You have to perform as an individual, and at the plate you have to swing the bat, and it's only you. No one can help you. When the ball comes to you, you're at shortstop and you catch the ground ball. No one can help you. You have to do that. It depends on your own skill and the time you've put in to prepare and practice the discipline. And but at the same time, there are 9 guys who play against the other 9 on the baseball field. You can't play the game completely by yourself. And in music, yes, there are people who can play solos and play just on that one instrument. Maybe that's common with the piano. But in general, we thrive on community. We thrive on fellowship. And we depend on the others in the group to support us, either while we're soloing or even when we're not soloing. We depend. And of course, as rhythm section players, we're constantly playing together, even when none of us is soloing. And so we have to engage each other as individuals and as team members, as an ensemble. Baseball and jazz, to me, are 2 of the most highly concentrated disciplines that involve both the individual and the collective.
Yeah.
And so when you catch a ground ball, you have to depend on somebody else being at the certain base so that you can throw to that person. They have to know to be there, whether it's any base, not just first base. There are dozens of defensive sets that the whole team has to be aware of, depending on the count, the batter's count, depending on the number of outs, depending on the score of the game, depending on the inning of the game, as to how you might prepare or deal with a certain situation. And the mental and physical skills necessary to play baseball are very, I mean, this is just a subjective way of looking at it, but they're pretty much 50-50. They're very equal, I should say. And playing music, as we said many times, playing music is an athletic event.
Yeah.
You have to be in shape to play music, and if you don't, your playing will decline or suffer or not be at its optimum level. And so anyway, that's the connection I want to make between baseball and music in general and
Mhm.
jazz in particular.
Yeah. Well, okay. I have two thoughts that come to mind. The first one, I don't know if you like, how have you thought about not getting lost in your individual part and being able to see the whole picture?
Yeah, you have to take care of business, as people say. You have to go into the shed and put in your time. Um, but uh,
Yeah, like you could be a fantastic team player, but if you don't actually contribute or do your job well, that like yes, everyone wants to play with someone who's supportive and a great hang and contributes, but if they like can't play in time, it that doesn't really make up for it.
right. So both musically and personally, um, I'm going to quote my old college schoolmate, the bassist Robert Hurst.
Mhm.
When he came back to school as a guest artist, he was on a panel discussion with uh, several people. I guess it was Peter Erskine and Alan Pasqua and forget who else was. But the students were asking all kinds of questions. I think this was before you arrived,
Okay.
and your freshman year, and they were asking questions about, you know, how to be a professional musician or whatever it is, and they went into all this detail about this or that thing or another, which probably most people have forgotten by now. But Bob, he said, man, he said, don't be a drag, man. And he meant that literally and figuratively, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Um, be somebody that people want to hang out with, but as well as be somebody who people want to play with. And don't be a drag, meaning being symbolic for, don't slow down. Don't pull everything down literally in tempo, but don't pull things down in spirit as well.
Yeah.
Um, and it has nothing to do with just sort of having a smile on your face all the time, though that certainly can't hurt. But the point is to transcend. Uh, I, I guess what I might call it is it's like music and the arts help to offset the mechanical drudgery of our existence. Okay,
Wow. Okay.
and when you're a drag, the mechanical drudgery of your existence is magnified.
Yeah, it's almost like sometimes I think about like if I can play a groove that's so compelling and locked into the point that you forget it's coming, not mechanical, but almost to the point of transcending physical limitation. That's so easy that you can forget about it and only experience it. Is that kind of what you mean? Does
Yeah,
that speak towards
yeah.
that? I don't
I
know if that
mean,
makes
it's
sense.
you know, and this touches on other things. I mean, so many things are related to everything, and I mentioned the word relationship and being relative to something. Being relative, that means you're related. I mean, it's a good thing to be relative. It's not it should not be a have a negative connotation when people just say, "Oh, that's relative," as if to mean that's bad or no good. And I'm thinking, it's relative. Well, tell me how it relates. I'm interested.
Yeah.
See? So, I mean, you had asked something else maybe about wellness and happiness in life, and that's more you know etymologically directed because of the name of the happy musician.
Yeah.
And so all these things, the wellness and happiness in life, to me, it's about the nurturing of relationships.
Mhm.
And when I say relationships, I mean specifically that relationships give meaning to life.
Because it gives it that relative perspective.
Well, all meaning is relational and relative. For example, let's start with the dictionary. Every word in the dictionary is not used in its definition. You cannot say a table is a table-like thing.
Okay, yeah.
Every meaning, every definition of every word is another word or a set of words.
Mm.
All meaning is metaphor. All of it. And it's like, I think the poet, the literary critic, I think it was Ezra Pound, who said, the meaning of every poem is always another poem. The meaning of
I like that.
anything, the meaning of anything and everything is always something other than itself.
Yeah, like the musically, like a melody, the meaning comes from not the meaning of a note is only shown through its relationship to another note.
Yeah, it's always in a relationship. No particular note has any meaning. It's always in a relationship. Where did it come from and where's it going?
Mhm.
And that's something you can apply to your life, man. I mean, it's simple and corny, but it's heavy and it's profound. And so, you know, you can even say things like nothing has meaning. Nothing is not a bad thing, and that has to do with my upbringing and being born and raised in Japan.
Okay, wait, sorry. When you say nothing has meaning,
You will just think
are
of the construct. Nothing,
the
nothing has meaning. In other words, nothing. It does have meaning.
ah
Nothing means something.
yeah, okay,
Okay,
like
it's not.
rest is still music.
Yeah, yeah. It's not that nothing. It's not when you say nothing has meaning. People seem like you're being dismissive. They act like, oh, you're just dismissing all meaning. No, I'm not.
Mm.
Nothing also has meaning. Something has meaning, but so does nothing. It has meaning for us. It's it's like
You could go one step further to say that in the same way that rest gives and space give notes meaning,
well, of course they
nothing
do.
gives something.
And
Things only have meaning in contrast to nothingness.
absolutely, and you have to frame a piece with nothing around it. Otherwise, it's not a piece unless you're just sort of playing for 24 hours all day long and you don't stop. Maybe you walk the streets of some town in India, and these cats are playing, music when you go to work, and on the way home, they're still playing when you get back.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only a performance because you weren't performing
Yeah, I
before and
mean,
after.
and this goes to, John Cage's 4 minutes and 33 seconds, which I'm not sure if I brought it to your class and Styles class, but I actually bought the score.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, it's in my office at school, but it's in 3 movements. And they're timed. They're timed. Even though he was rejecting the Western Aristotelian mean, golden mean, and all that kind of thing, the first movement is a certain number of seconds. The second movement's longer, and the third movement's the shortest.
Mm.
And he even has designed it that way. Of course, he says
Wait, I don't know what that is.
4 minutes and 33 seconds.
No, the golden mean or what you
It
called
is,
it.
there's you have to go back and look at. You can Google Aristotle
Okay.
and in Greek philosophy, and you can and there it's and he wrote about a drama, you know, you have a climax and, you know, have a,
Oh,
and
okay.
and then there's um, uh, uh, this balance in life and so forth that you can find all, you know, all kinds of things that have influenced Western philosophy
Okay.
since
Was
that
this
time.
in specifically in like the length of different pieces in a movement and how they should
Well,
relate to each
yeah,
other?
what I'm saying is that John Cage, he's still following a certain balance
Oh, okay.
in the length of well, first of all, he's got three movements. Well, that's a Western construct, but he's got the first movement a certain length, the second movement is a little bit longer, and then the third movement is shorter. So and you know, like I said, he's done this on purpose.
Mm,
And he said, I wrote all the notes, it's just they're all silent. And but you know, his point is that we may have eyelids, but we don't have earlids.
mm,
And I mean, ultimately, you know, life is art and art is life. And living your life, you know, creatively, compassionately, with kindness, beauty, care, and love. That's the greatest privilege and art of all. So all this is, life is about, you know, things, and things happen, but sometimes nothing happens, or no things happen.
mm.
Nothing is no thing, but uh that carries into my notion that I get teased about a lot, you know, when I tell people to go out and talk to a tree,
Yeah.
because it's like nothing, right? Well, no, wait a minute. It's not, if it's not necessarily nothing, but if it is, it's something. There's a sense in which the talking to a tree is a way for you to calm yourself, to um and you know
And you
they
mean literally like going and finding some time to yourself in nature and like conversing with a tree,
well,
right?
yeah, and you
Do
don't
you
have to do it literally. It's
okay.
not, you know, you don't have to say, hey, Mr. Tree, or Mrs. Tree.
How was your
Hey,
day?
what's up, man? You know,
How
I
is the
guess in the
soil?
Lord of the Rings, you have the trees come to save the day and all this kind of stuff, and that's hip. But but the point is, the um, trees are a repository of calm wisdom,
Mm,
and you know, and we've even unfortunately commodified it by having the great redwoods in California, and people drive through these trees, and you know, for commercial reasons, you know, and that's kind of a, that's, I mean, it's a cool experience, but it's kind of sad to me. But I understand why there's a, you know, why it appeals to people. But the point is that the trees, the 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 quiet, um, it allows you to reflect, and it allows you to you know, to meditate if you want, or pray, or contemplate, and it allows you to just kind of sit back and you know, the old 19th century thing, you know, let nature be your guide. It allows some of that to kick in. It As far as relationships are concerned, that of course becomes an ecological relationship. You know, there are all kinds of relationships we have in life, you know, spiritual, social, emotional, psychological, you know, with self. I said social with others, intellectual, aesthetic relationship. You know, do you, when you stop and look at a tree, or look at it, I mean, the fall foliage, you know, as you know, Brown County is the most beautiful place in the country during October. And uh, that aesthetic awareness, how does that actually, I mean, I want to just stare at it, man, and just go out and be enveloped and hugged by it.
mm.
And uh, that I think helps enrich my awareness of my surroundings. Also, I hope anyway that it can have a humbling effect on us. And it's kind of like, you know, look, every one of us has been, warmed by fires we did not build.
Mm.
We did not build. Every one of us has been warmed by fires we did not build. Every one of us has drunk from wells we did not dig. Every one of us has been on a road we had nothing to do with building or drawing up. We are the beneficiaries of millions of things that dead people have done for us
Mm. Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
past, as well as people right now. And that's why I'm always I always like to quote the English poet John Donne. He lived, late 1500s, early 1600s, and he wrote in one of his meditations. He wrote probably some of the most famous lines in the English language: "No man is an island." And it goes, "No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent,
Mm.
a part of the main." Uh, and he just goes on, what does it say? "Any man's death diminishes me."
Yeah.
And because I'm involved in humankind, man. The interconnectedness that we all have, whether strangers or friends or whatever, uh, is paramount to life. And one reason why people feel alienated and isolated is because that either has been taken away from them, or they have drifted away from that notion of community. And the community is not just with other people. I say it's with, with the trees, with nature. And just looking out, I mean, right now, just a few snowflakes are falling, and uh, the one thing good about Indiana, of course, is that we have 4 seasons.
Yeah.
Granted, I'd like for the winter to be 3 weeks instead of 3 months, but that's I
Can't win
don't
'em
have a
all.
say in that. But uh, I just like spring and fall because that shows when things change.
Mm.
That shows that, and the Japanese notion of the impermanence of things. That's kind of in a Zen way, but uh, the Japanese composer Takemitsu wrote a piece. Was it November Garden? Anyway, I heard him talk about how he was trying to match certain things in the ensemble in his orchestration. He was trying to match certain aspects of texture and duration of a Japanese garden.
Mm.
So you notice that there are rocks in some gardens and they don't move and they don't change at all. Well, he might reflect that with either pedal point or drones or long tones or whatever you want. And then there are those, the leaves that change over time. Well, those can be reflected in some other instruments. And maybe, there's a bird chirping here, or there's some butterflies here and there, and maybe there's some other creatures that are doing this. Well, he reflects that in the music.
Mm.
So it's just a different way of approaching composition.
Yeah, I like it.
I think I mentioned in styles class that when you compose a tune, you might have some melodic idea or whatever, but often it's effective and it will get your musical vision in place if you think of either a person, a place, an event, something concrete, not just an
Well, you had
idea.
about how
not just an
things are,
idea, but
yeah, things are
something.
relative, right? Giving it
Yes, yes, something
context.
concrete, and because that allows metaphor to come to life. You see,
Mm,
and that's why, like I say, that's why we have all meaning is metaphorical, but the arts are like the ultimate in that metaphor.
yeah.
It's like I said, to offset the mechanical drudgery of our existence. That I've been using that phrase for a while.
I really like it. Well, it speaks towards specifically that I feel like comes into play. It's maybe a more specific way to talk about the individual versus the community question.
Yeah,
In music, on an individual level, it takes a tremendous amount of analytical study or like mechanical understanding of how of what makes good music and how to create that on an individual level, right? And then if you aren't careful, you lock yourself into that mechanical drudgery on the bandstand instead of having that be something that you master and escape and have freedom through that process to, I don't know, like it, bliss, I don't know what you want to call it, but you can almost, I feel like, escape this like existence. I wish I had a more poetic way to say it, but
yeah.
do you
Well,
know what I mean?
it's not escaping existence. I think what it is you're. It's a paradox, but you're embracing existence.
Hmm.
You're embracing it more deeply. You're trying to capture beauty and in one moment, and they're often moments, man. There's often just
Mhm.
one moment. It's kind of like
Yeah,
that's why
sometimes like there's one moment in a whole album
yeah,
that's
yeah,
that special thing.
but that's why I like and the other thing, Japanese influence on me is haiku poetry. So
Okay.
every now and then I like to post a picture or a photograph on Facebook, and then I write a haiku poem to go with it. Something that strikes me, and the haiku poem traditionally has been a poem. It's the poem of the noun and the verb. Yeah, there's some adjectives and adverbs, but primarily it's noun verb with some other words, and it emphasizes that moment. So and it emphasizes an aesthetic moment. So, for example, the analogy I often used in styles class was if you're at the park and and you're trying to describe that an experience you have, we tend to um, share our experiences in an emotional way. There's nothing wrong with that, but we use all these strings of adjectives, and we say, "Oh, I had a great time at the park. It was so wonderful, man. It was fantastic. Gosh, it was amazing." Now you're happy for this person, but you have absolutely no idea the context that helped them feel this way. Okay.
Mm. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So if you say, on the other hand, you don't even have to be emotional about it. If you say, I had a wonderful day at the park the other day. Uh, it was early in the evening. The sun was setting, and you know how it gets real big, on the horizon. That optical illusions are big and orange, and I was sitting back in my hands. I could feel ants crawling on my hands in the grass. I saw these kids off in the distance playing frisbee with their dog. I could hear the leaves rustling in the tree above me, beside me, and it. I don't even have to use any adjective. I just use nouns and verbs, and
You
now
set the stage.
you're already. I've given you the context
You've
to
shared the
actually
experience.
feel whatever it is that you want to feel from that and experience from that, and then you have your own aesthetic moment. You see, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's what
Okay.
the Japanese haiku poetry does. It's got nouns and verbs, and it gives you a concrete even though there's a built-in ambiguity in Far Eastern philosophy, some people might say, but I mean, just as an example, there is no difference in Japanese language. They have no difference between singular and plural. There's no S in Japanese.
Hmm.
All words, it's implied.
Okay.
You say one book, two book, three book, four book, or or you can say one books, two books. It's the same word.
Okay.
Um, uh, but anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But the point is that it's a concrete example that or a concrete experience that the haiku is trying to address, and that's why when I write those poems, I try to match them with the picture maybe in a way not just that describes the picture, though mere description can actually set a context for you. Now, okay, let's apply that to music. How am I going to make it so that I'm trying to engage everybody else in the ensemble in the combo or whatever? How can I engage them in such a way that I'm not just being, hey, everybody, look at how wonderful and fantastic and amazing something is. In that case, some people will be too flamboyant, or they'll go over the top, and it's like it won't be appropriate. David Baker used to talk about appropriateness in your musical choices. So you can have contrasts, but if people are playing, everybody's playing soft, suddenly you don't just bang everything to death. You don't raise the volume. I mean, that's an obvious example, but the point is having deep listening to the point where your aesthetic awareness and how you respond to people is supportive, clever, empathetic, witty, caring, and all these things. And it's all these things that we're trying to aspire to as human beings in life anyway. So essentially, you're just mirroring that on the bandstand, or you should be.
Yeah.
And when we have an experience on the bandstand where things were going right and everybody was in sync so well, man, it feels so good. But you don't have to, you can say that, but the point is, let's go back and you can analyze in retrospect why it felt so good. Well, it's because people were listening closely. Their timing was right. When you hear me talking, I think something that might emerge, or I hope emerges, is the fact that I like to talk in metaphor,
Yeah.
because I always bring in things that are meta musical or extra musical, or whether it's baseball or trees or table tennis or haiku poetry, whatever have you. All these things to me uh, have connectedness to each other, and no man is an island. Once again,
Well, I like it because it's not, I feel like you're just offering up perspectives for students to use if they want to contextualize making music. Give it those relationships and those contexts. You can think about it however you want to, but certainly hopefully you're thinking about something to give it meaning, something
yeah,
to channel and bring through with the music, and you're just giving out things that you do that help you do that. But hopefully, I don't know, for me it was just options and then also encouraging me to come up with those on my own.
yes, oh yeah, and I mean, these things happen um, when they start to happen naturally on the bandstand. Then you're reaching a level of a what's the term that the German critic writer Joachim Berendt says, something about you're reaching a high integration
Hmm.
of combo experience. And and the thing is, like Dave Holland said at a clinic in MA 454 when he was here several years before you arrived,
Okay.
he said you might have a wonderful uh, set or gig one night, at a club. He says, you can't rely on that the next night. You can't, we can't live by just showing our scrapbooks to each other all the time. I mean, that's fine, but, and you can listen to that gig over and over again, that's fine. But if you go out the next night, you got to start from zero again, and you have to make a whole new thing.
Yeah.
And music being the temporal art that it is, that's what makes it beautiful. Every baseball game's the same. You can't rely on the fact that you won 10-2 the night before, because you're liable to get beat 10-2 that night, the next night. And you can't rest on your laurels. It's like, the philosopher Kierkegaard said, historians teach us to understand life backwards, but they often fail to understand that you have to live life forwards.
Yeah.
And so you got to live in the moment, man. And that's why there's even a phrase, we say the aesthetic moment, the haiku moment. And we are playing music as these moments, they're fleeting. The influence of Japanese philosophy on me is that the impermanence of life, well, spring and fall really magnify that. They magnify things changing, coming to life, things dying, falling leaves, and all this. And the cherry blossoms only are out for a few weeks or days or whatever, each spring, and then they're gone. The Japanese concept of time, there's a word in Japanese, it's literally called ma, M-A, and it kind of means space and time. The Japanese don't have a problem with quantum physics. It's the same thing. Space and time are the same thing. Okay, so the space between the gate, the Japanese character for gate is two pillars, and then you put the character for sun inside the gate, and that's character for time. It's the sun passing through the gate, the time that it takes to pass, and also the space in which it occupies to pass. Anyway, so ma, and when I compared, I applied that aesthetic concept to jazz improvisation in a paper back in 1993 at the American Comparative Literature Association conference. And I presented a paper, and I took Miles Davis's solo, actually not a solo, but just the interpretation of the head on My Funny Valentine.
Okay.
And then also 11 years earlier, in 1953, I took Lee Konitz's melody on All the Things You Are. Not the solo, but just the melody. And in both examples, both Miles and Lee Konitz at the top of the melody, at the apex, the main point, that coming out of the bridge of My Funny Valentine and coming out of the bridge of All the Things You Are, both Miles and Davis and Lee Konitz, they don't play. They leave it blank. And you, the listener, you can't help but hear it, you see. The silence is so loud that you are in the moment deeper than you would have been had they played the melody at that moment. So I titled my paper, I'm going to do it front to back. In scholarly papers, you have a title and you put colon and then you put another phrase. That's the typical. So my second phrase was gesture and silence in jazz improvisation.
Okay.
But my first title, I tried to be catchy, was less is ma.
Yeah.
And ma being the Japanese aesthetic concept for the space between. And so just obviously a silly play on words of less is more, but that's the whole point of what I was trying to say. And using the jazz examples helped me have an intertextuality of the arts, of music and the Japanese aesthetic concept. And that brought me to in jazz styles class, where I would often talk in the beginning of the semester about synesthesia. And synesthesia meaning the combining of more than one sense together, but interpreting one sense with another sense. And now, how can we do that musically? That's something that I might have your listeners and viewers. I would encourage them to explore. But for example, let's say I'm at the park that same day, and I see there's a flower next to the tree, and I reach down to smell the flower, and right at that moment, the some the carry-on bells or church bells or whatever, they start ringing and the distance. And what happens is the sound of the bells sinks into the fragrance of the flower so that I can smell sound.
Mm.
And then, or I can hear the fragrance. And I submit to you that the most special experiences that anyone will have in life are often those synesthetic moments where more than one sense overlapped with another.
Yeah.
Driving up the road to your grandmother's, and you're not anywhere near, so you physically can't, you physically cannot smell the apple pie, but you do. You can see the apple pie's fragrance, or you can feel it, you can anticipate it, and your senses start getting all mixed up, and you start hearing the fragrance of that apple pie. It becomes very loud.
Mm.
And now there is a minuscule percentage, I don't know what it is, 0.1%, or I don't know what, of people who actually do experience chemical reactions in synesthetic reaction. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the figurative way that we all in general experience synesthesia.
And how these different senses are happening at the same time and how they relate to each other and give each other context.
That's right. And how they overlap into each other, so that you start to you can hear fragrance, you can smell sound. It's like uh, the novel. Let's see, is it Joris Karl Huysmans? Huysmans.
Okay.
He wrote a novel. I read it in existentialism in novels, and I remember when I was in high school. And along with Albert Camus' The Plague, and Jean-Paul Sartre's Nausea, and so forth. But in that novel, he has this guy. In order to experience the sounds of the music of the organ, he pours perfumes into the pipes, so that when certain notes are played, he can smell a certain sound. Like,
Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, we talk about Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, the pastoral. F is pastoral, and E flat, eroica is majestic, and C minor is tragic, and D minor, lots of funeral marches. Mahler, whoever, certain, of course, back then, certain keys had certain the doctrine of affections. It had a certain connection. Now the keys don't have that connection, because it's now equal temperament.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But there's still a sense in which certain, even on the piano, you play certain tunes in this or that key. Yes, we manipulate that primarily due to the singer's range, and also the maybe that sounds better on tenor this way, maybe it sounds better on alto in another key. But the point is, I mean, this cat in the novel. I mean, this cat's, yeah, this is getting kind of out there, man. He's wanting to pour these perfumes in there because he wants to smell that sound, man.
Mm.
And it's almost like the way Scriabin talked about music in colors. Like, certain keys had colors to them for him. And, he wasn't stoned or anything. I mean, that's just the way you don't have to be stoned to enjoy the deep
Yeah, I think
Aesthetic
all
pleasures of
these
life.
different things sometimes people get lost in the weeds on, or they think about it so literally in where it comes down to like every time a killer musician comes in, everyone's like, "Do you have synesthesia?" And as if it has to be this literal
Right.
connection thing.
No,
I
it
think
does
what
not.
really all this speaks to is that like if you want your music to mean something, give it meaning, but you can choose what that is. And if you want to like associate certain sounds with colors, you can do that, or with memories, or with people or places, or with the feelings and emotions. I know Stefan Harris talks about that a lot. Like these are all options, and like pick one and experiment with it and see if it works for you, but give it some kind of context, right? Like you can
Yeah,
choose
yeah.
any of these and it doesn't have to be literal. It can just be almost an
Stepan
exercise
Harris
or a
gave,
practice, but it could be, but it that doesn't mean it's not real. I so often I think we're looking for confirmation of like, okay, well, what does this key mean? Like, what is this feeling? This is the tragic key. But like you said, everything's relative. Maybe to you in that moment it is. I think instead of looking for singular answers for these, it should just be looking for an answer, like one option, and
well,
being
yeah,
present for what that is.
yeah, and there are sometimes the answers are everybody wants clear cut answers, you know, just black and white, yes or no. But that's not that's not the answer you're going to get all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, you want proof of this and proof of that. That's not the answers that we're provided. What we really long for, man, is to be loved. It's not proof of this or proof of that. Whether you've gone a bit philosophical or theological or whatever, yeah, sometimes it can be a fun exercise to engage in all kinds of discussions and so forth. But ultimately, all of that falls flat. And what we really care about is what the guy said in Nature Boy. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is to love and be loved in return. Or the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. And you know that's what we do on the bandstand. We're trying to give some love, and then we're being loved back.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do in family. That's what we're trying to do with loved ones, and you know, with friends, with job, whatever it is. Um, that's what we seek. And often people try to hide behind either proofs for or against whatever it is they're talking about, and as if you know, to score points or something.
Yeah.
But life isn't about scoring points like that. It's we want to feel loved, and we want to feel cared for, and we want to be respected. We want all this kind of thing. Um, Granted, love is unconditional. You know, respect, they say respect is earned and love is given. Um, but those, it's, and I don't mean that emotional feeling. I mean a, um, a strong sense of awareness that we are being loved and nurtured. And, you know, you can uh, talk in circles about uh, things that are scientific. And I'm not downplaying that. Science is great,
Hmm.
but you know, science explains so much, and it's wonderful. But it doesn't explain the deepness and significance of why we seek love. Why? And no one can answer that scientifically. You can't weigh love on a scale, man. It cannot be done.
Yeah.
And yet it's what we seek. And so for our own nurturing and wellness and happiness in life, it's not we don't, we might say we want proof of this or proof of that, or, a loved one say, prove to me you love me, or whatever it is. Uh, but the point is, the scientific proofs go a long way, but they don't answer that question of wellness and happiness in life. Love is what does that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I so appreciate all this. You're always just a fountain of wisdom, and it's very fun to get in touch with that again outside of school.
Yeah, yeah. No, I always I know how much joy it brought David Baker when students would stay in touch with him. And even though when I was a student, I thought I wasn't negative about it. I didn't think, yeah, yeah, whatever. It's not that I felt that way, but I didn't realize to what extent uh, uh, I would feel the same way. 'Cause those of you who have been gone, who have stayed in touch, it brings me great joy.
Yeah, I don't. I think every music student out there can reach out to their mentors more. I think this is all fantastic. I don't know if there's anything else that just on general health and wellness that you're that's sitting on the
You
edge of
know,
your tongue, but
the one last thing I might say is, and I hope that your viewers have figured it out by now, but one key to this wellness happiness thing, I think, is having um uh, a diversity and multiplicity of interests in your life.
yeah,
And I have encouraged people to uh, develop interests that have seemingly on the surface have nothing to do with music. I could be some hobby. It could be, I don't know, man. It could be collecting stamps, man. It could be, I mean, when I go overseas, I like to buy, it's my cheap way of remembering, but I like to buy the local postcards. I just encourage people to have interests outside, go to the art museum, look at how other artists have worked, look at how the intertextuality of the arts has been manifested throughout history. Look at how musicians uh, have been interested in art, or how artists are interested in musicians. Um, Edward Said, the Palestinian American uh, writer, was a fine pianist and musician, and he wrote about music. The Musical Elaborations, I think, is his book. Um, and Edward Said, Said, and uh, develop interests that uh, are seemingly unrelated. But I think the point is, when you relate, or when you do those things, you can't help but funnel them through your own being, and I think they affect you, or they affect different things that you do in a positive way, and they enhance what you do.
yeah,
I mean, when my teachers were preparing me for a recital performance in classical music, they would say, "Don't just spend all day at the piano. Go do something else. Go out and have a picnic, or go out and shoot the breeze with your friends. Get your mind off it. Do something else. Don't be just completely one track minded." And I think that when that happens, you bring that to the bandstand, and you have uh, uh, there's more of a diverse interest in what's going on, or the diversity, I think, allows you to bring a wider perspective to your human relationships, and that in turn has an impact and effect on how you play with other musicians, because you see them as human beings, not just as some kind of mechanical robots doing the music, or, as I said earlier, the mechanical drudgery of our existence. You try to
yeah.
transcend that.
Hmm.
So I would just encourage people to branch out, and this is on an academic level. This is why I really dig the fact that we had we instituted that bachelor of science degree a long time ago in jazz studies with an emphasis on an outside field.
Hmm.
You can do another thing if you want.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great degree. Um, and uh, yeah, it doesn't have to be teaching. It can be any other topic. And like I say, it might be a topic that seems so far fetched, but because it's going through you, there's going to be an interrelatedness with that. You will develop relationships that are a lot more far-reaching, both literally and figuratively and aesthetically.